There's an order of speakers here. Krista's first, so we're waiting on Krista.
Nope. Just Kim. We're
Kim's
going to go right
first.
to Kim. Yep.
Thank you. Let me know when I should start.
Go for it.
All right. Hi, how are you? Thanks for coming out. My name is Kim Hamilton. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Dawes Elementary, and I'm also the education chair for the Evanston History Center's Board of Trustees. I'm happy you're here. There's so much history woven into the buildings of our learning institutes, and I have the honor of introducing our presenter tonight, Kris Hartzell. I had the pleasure of spending time with Kris when she came over to the Dawes Elementary Ice Cream Social last year. We were celebrating Charles Dawes' birthday, and Kris and Krista came by to share information about Dawes, the center, and about Evanston. Our families had the opportunities to ask questions about Dawes and other Evanston facts. And I want to tell you, Kris is a living library. She was so helpful to the individuals who asked questions. I've also had the pleasure of joining her on a walking tour. And if you haven't had a chance to hear Kris talk about the neighborhoods, the buildings, and the local history that makes Evanston special, you are keeping yourself from a wonderful experience. Kris Hartzell is a lifetime Evanstonian. She's the Director of Facilities, Visitor Services, and Collections here at the Center. She has served as the Vice Chair of the Evanston Preservation Commission, as well as other history museum boards. She has a certificate in historic preservation from Northwestern University and a Master's of Science in Historic Preservation from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Kris has co-authored 2 books on the historic built environment and has contributed to many articles, including the Evanston Roundtable, Ask the Historian. My favorite fact to share, there's a street named after her right outside. Please welcome Kris Hartzell.
Thank you, Kim. All right. I have to don this microphone for the live feed here. Krista told me how to turn it on. Triple whammy on that. There we go. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. When Krista and I first started talking about doing this, I thought the term, the idiom or whatever, "fools rush in," comes to mind now. I thought, great, I'll talk about it. I love to talk about Evanston. I love to talk about Evanston schools. I grew up in Evanston. I went to Evanston schools. My kids went to Evanston schools. I know about Evanston schools. And then I got into it. And this is a big topic and a long talk. And so I'm going to try to make it as reasonable as I can. So one of the things I want to mention is if there's a lot of questions, let's try to hold them to the end, because otherwise we'll be here till midnight, and because I do have a lot of schools to cover. There are really more than I realized. And I'm an architectural historian, so that means this is a talk about buildings. There's a lot going on in Evanston right now, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to do this talk, because there's a lot of talk about closing schools and things like that. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into the politics of it. I'm not the likelihood of this, that, or the other thing. I'm not an educator, so I can't speak to. I still don't know the difference between a middle school and an intermediate school and a junior high school, or what the definition exactly of a magnet school is. But when we talk about the schools, I'm going to go through them chronologically. So some of them, it's going to take us right up to present day, right? Because the school's still open and it's still functioning and it's still changing, and some of them have sort of dropped off, and it's interesting to see what happened to them and what happened to the building, what happened to the lot, and they're all different stories. So, however that informs what's going to happen today, we'll see. I did have just a couple preambles that I want to mention. So the buildings are going to reflect the changing times. Stylistically, it's interesting to see how they change, and also technologically. It's interesting to see what's important as they're building them. For a while it became ventilation, That was important. Light was important. Toilets were important. First we got indoor plumbing, then they were all in the basement, and you got to take your class down once a day or twice a day, which I can't even imagine what that must have been like. And then Dwight Perkins, who was an Evanstonian and very well known for his educational buildings and was the Chicago schools architect for years at the early part of the century. He informed a lot of our buildings. He did a lot of our buildings. His son Larry did a lot of our buildings with Perkins and Will. And there was, of course, Raymond Pagozzi, who worked for Ganster and Henninghausen, and also his own company, OWP&P, for many years, and they did a lot of buildings. So we've been blessed in this town to have local architects who were really good at educational buildings. Schools, as we're learning now, are extra-governmental. They don't report to the city. They operate on their own with the school board, and so that it sort of influences, or doesn't influence, maybe a lot of the decisions they make or the way they evolve. Let's see if I've left anything out. No, I think that basically covers it. This building here, Krista and I just sort of randomly picked out a number of buildings, like this will be our lead for the PR and everything. And of course, this is my alma mater, Lincoln School. And so it means a lot to me to see it up there. And that is, I think, when people ask me sometimes, how did you get into this field? How did you get into historic preservation? I said, well, I think it started when they tore my school down when I was 10 years old. I think that really affected me. And so this building means a lot. I can remember sitting on those windowsills on the first floor at the far right. They were great for kindergartners to sit on. But so I'm going to start at the beginning, begin at the beginning. And I'm going way back, but just for an understanding, a lot of people talk, before there was Evanston, there was Ridgeville. And Ridgeville was a township, and later a smaller town within the township. And it wasn't until the 1850s when Evanston was formed and became their own township, and Ridgeville Township sort of disappeared. And that kind of gives you an idea of the size of it on the left there from 1850, and the population level, which was fairly low in the early days. And the very first school that was in what is now Evanston was the Ridgeville building, the Ridgeville School, and the plaque is still there. It was on the corner of what is now Greenleaf and Ridge, and it was a log cabin, and it had just a few students until for about 10 years. And then the second building that was built, this is that's a map of Ridgeville, just to give you an idea of how long it was. I mean, it started in Bowmanville, which is now Rogers Park, and it went all the way up to Central Street in Evanston. And all those little dots are where people live. So on the left here, I just kind of zeroed in on where the schoolhouse was. It says there, right above the Crane House. And on the right, I circled the lower one is Mulford, so everybody knows where 10 Mile House was in Mulford's, and then the middle one is the school, and then the upper one was the Buckeye Hotel, which was up on Noy Street, so that kind of gives you a feeling of the scale of it. The second building was built in 1852, and it was located on Church east of Maple, and that's a rendering of it. I don't know how accurate it was, but that was from the early 1900s, if people remembered what it looked like. And when that got too small, it was moved to Orrington, north of Davis, and later used as a laundry and a polling place for the city. So it's an adaptive reuse of a school building. And then the third building was on Benson, north of Church, and that's a sandbar map. Sandbar maps are the fire insurance maps, and they're really invaluable when you're trying to navigate historically. So you can see it there on the left, the public school. The second story was added in 1870, and then it was moved to 1018 Emerson. Actually, it had a couple different addresses on Emerson, in about 1892. And that building, I have memories of as well, and maybe some of you old timers do, became Crossed Furniture. Remember Crossed? Bought a great hutch at Crossed. So it was there for many years, and you can see in their advertising from as late as the 1980s, they were saying located in a wing of the old Benson School. And then, of course, as they note, it was later demolished for the research park. And now, whatever it is, E2 or something, that big building there. So this is what, just to kind of reorient you a little bit, it was moved because they put the Chicago and Milwaukee tracks in starting in 1889. So what we think of as the L tracks now. So that's why they had to move this school. But it was sort of timely because about that time they built the first Haven School, which is in the lower right-hand corner. That was built in 1888. And also I noticed later when I was going further on the talk, so I circled back to this, the middle little building that I circled, which was Second Baptist Church in 1899, which is when this map is from, was actually the original Miller School building. And it got moved over there and used as a Baptist church. So there's a picture of the first Haven School. It's where the Marshall Fields is now, and in the Varsity Theater. It was there on that corner. It was designed by Burnham and Root, and it was named for Superintendent Erastus Haven, and those are the years that he was superintendent. As I went through this, I realized that a majority of the schools have been named for superintendents, so I started sort of listing them, and then I gotta tell you, I gave up because most of them are. If they're not a street name school, then they're named for one of the superintendents of district. Well, we'll talk about the districts, the school districts. The second school, it seems like about the 1800s, there were about 3 major schools in Evanston, was Central School, which was in South Evanston, which was a separate town until 1892. So it had a separate school district, District 76, I believe. And it was on southeast corner of Main, which was first called Lincoln, and once it merged with North Evanston, or Evanston proper, which already had a Lincoln Street, they changed the name to Main. And Elmwood, and this is the second building. I have a picture of the first building, which was designed in 1874 by Ed Brooke and Burnham, not Burnham, Daniel Burnham, different Burnham, and it was destroyed by fire in 1894. And then it was replaced by this building in 1895, which was designed by a firm called Thomas and Rapp, which I had never heard of, so I did a little digging, and I found all this advertisement and write-ups about this school and Thomas and Rapp in local school journals. Everybody was very proud of the school. It was very innovative. It had a lot of light. It had a lot of room. It was brick and it's purportedly fireproof. But so that's the third central building. And then, that's another shot of it, which I thought was prettier. And apparently the fountain that was in front of it, similar to the fountain that used to be in Fountain Square, but slightly different, and was meant to be a memorial to the firefighters who had doused the flames in the first one. And it's very similar to Lincoln School. Sometimes when you're looking through pictures, you have to be sure you're talking about the right one. So this is Central. And then, not a very good picture, I found somewhere online of when it was became Park School. So this is the fourth building, 1959, O'Donnell, Wicklund, Pagosi, and Peterson. And of course, Raymond Pagosi lived in Evanston, as I mentioned. It was closed in 1979, and then it was vacant until 1985, when Park School, which was a school for handicapped and challenged kids, moved in there. And actually, there was a lot of concern at the time about amongst parents, because the building that they had, which was out closer to the canal, was all on one floor, and they were very concerned about that this building wasn't going to be suitable for their students because it was 2 stories. And then another of the first schools in Evanston was the Dempster Street School. I actually found late, and just today, the picture of Second Baptist Church that Robinson had put together on a tour of Black History in Evanston. So I don't know for sure if that's the building, but it looks the right size and the right style for that time period. It's very churchy. It's got those Gothic arches, so I don't know if it was modified or what. But when it became too small, it was moved, as we saw in the earlier map, and sold. And then the first iteration of what they then started calling the Hinman Avenue School was built in 1882. And I love the style, and I like this picture because of all the kids out in front. It was purportedly 1 story, though it looks like 2 to me. And I think I have another photograph of it here, yeah. Which was designed by a local Evanston architect, Asa Lyon. Not very well known these days, but everybody calls him the first architect that was a resident of Evanston.
You know where on Hinman?
Pardon me?
You know where on Hinman it is?
Yeah, corner of Hinman and Dempster. I think I have a map. There's another shot of it, actually. Yeah, it's still there. It's Caravale. We'll go into that. Yeah. So that's another panoramic view of it. And you'll notice, and I think I pointed out in a subsequent slide, there are concrete balconies over the front, over the doors. Those were later removed. And that was designed by Daniel Burnham, one of several schools in Evanston that was designed by him. This is another shot, like I said, notice the balconies and the flat front. So the long front on the right, that facade runs along Dempster Street. We're standing on Hinman right now. So that has changed over time. I guess there's a map, but it doesn't give you a good shot of where it was. It got added onto in 1949 with the gym wing. There was a playground expansion, and District 60, well, the district at the time, I think it was 65 by that point, yeah, was housed in that building, which stood right behind, you can see it at the top there, the yellow, and that was demolished and moved so that they could have a larger playground as the gym and the auditorium wing ate up more of their playground space. So again, more adaptations. And there it is today. You can see that bay on the right-hand side. That was added in, not that late. That's the wrong date. I missed that. Maurice Webster. It was earlier than 69, and it was closed in 1976. It was sold to the city, who then leased it to Caravale Montessori for many years, and I believe they purchased it. So that's another destination. And you can see, like I said, they removed the balconies. It's just a flat piece. I imagine they got a little precarious, and you don't want them falling on anybody's head. There were a lot of plans to do some further additions. I think they felt that it was getting too small for the area, and they had made some plans. They delayed them, they abandoned them, they ditched them, and eventually that became one of the schools that was closed, and students were later moved, and we'll talk about that some more in a bit. So the East Side School, later known as Lincoln School, this is a shot of the building from 1886. It was the corner of Forest and what at that time was Lincoln, which is, I believe, why they named it, also probably for Abraham Lincoln, which later became Main Street. And then the building that we saw at the beginning, that was built in 1894 by another Evanston architect, J.T.W. Jennings. I found this in the file. It didn't have a date on it, but I'm going to guess it was 1946 because those 5 houses were moved, and I happen to know where one of them was moved, and according to the city, it was moved in 1946. So again, they were enlarging the playground. It had an addition put on the east side of it, on the Forest Avenue side, in 1925. And then they added the gymnasium about 1960, and I think that's probably part of the reason why they moved a lot of those houses as well. And that was, again, O'Donnell, Wicklund, Pigozzi, and Peterson who did that. I was the last class to graduate from that school in 1966. I'm in 5th grade. I remember the last day of school, my friends and I, we all ran around the school. My best friend and I went up to the 3rd floor, which was called the Assembly Hall. It was never open. All the years I was there, nobody was allowed up into the 3rd floor. It wasn't considered safe anymore after they had put the gym in. So I believe Assembly Hall Gym, which is another iteration that happens when early days before gymnasiums were considered standard equipment for a school. You'd have the assembly hall, and it would just be a big open area for congregating. You would have an auditorium that would serve as the auditorium, it would serve as the gymnasium. And as you can see from the sketch, which isn't exactly the way it looks as it was built, but they kept the gymnasium that had just been built in 1960. And they endeavored to keep in the lower left-hand corner the 1925 addition to the original building. So as it happened, they ended up not keeping it, and there was a great deal of discussion about whether it was worth keeping or not. Some pictures of it as it was getting torn down. a close-up of the gargoyles, and just pro hack, we've got the gargoyles on our lawn out here, so if you ever want to go check them out, they're guarding the back path to the driveway there. And we also have the cornerstone box and all the contents that were in it, which is fun. So that's the school as it was built in 1968 by Ganster and Hennighausen. And as I said, and I keep hitting on Pagosi because, full transparency, I'm related to his son. He's my brother-in-law. But and if he came tonight, I wanted to be sure I mentioned his dad. And actually how he got involved in doing was that he worked for Ganster and Hennighausen for years. And when they started getting all these Evanston commissions, they opened an Evanston office, and Ray headed up the Evanston office and started out on his own at about 1959, 1960. And do you remember, I was so glad I found a picture of I call them the bubble windows.
Yeah.
Like a dolphin, right? Didn't they have a dolphin in it?
Yeah, we'll get to that because that's their motto, their mascot now.
Yeah.
But and I remember talking to Andy Pagosi, who's also an architect and also specialized in schools like his dad. And he said, oh God, that god-awful addition that they did, when they determined that 1925 edition wasn't going to work in 1970, they did this kindergarten edition and had those bubble windows, which I keep forgetting aren't there anymore. I was going to drive by and take a picture, and no, they're gone. And I actually stumbled across the architect's name. I couldn't find much about him, but so he was responsible for that.
That playground stuff.
Yeah, and then again, I was like, oh yeah, they've actually completely redone it. When was that? So 2012, TMP Architecture was the name of the architect. So they essentially just wrapped the building, in my opinion, with some modifications. They removed the bubble windows. They added a lot of glass and some hallways. They supposedly uncovered the arch that you see in the upper left-hand corner, and people over the years have come to me and said, oh, that's the arch from the original building. It's inside. Actually, I've been inside because that's my polling place. And I looked down, I'm like, that just does not look like it's from the original building to me. It doesn't look old enough. And I believe it's actually from the 1925 edition, so they did leave that when they ended up tearing it down. So just to be clear, it's from the 1925 edition. And then talking about dolphins and things, Linda, they have all these mosaic murals. They keep calling them murals. I want to call them mosaics that are sort of in what's left of those square pieces. I don't know if I've got a pointy thing on this. You can kind of see them in the middle of the building there. And TMP, they're from Michigan. I know, do we hire outside Evanston architects? Apparently we do. They say they specialize in education. And then we'll go on to the Wesley Avenue School, which later became Dewey. I don't have any pictures of the original building, but I think there was one there before 1882 when this school was designed. It got small rather immediately, and I had a 2-room addition by another Evanston architect, Stephen Jennings. And then, as I say, was renamed for Dewey, who wasn't actually a superintendent, but he was a longtime school board member. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to get my Myron Hunt plug in, because we all know I did my thesis on Myron. I got more information about his buildings than you ever want to know. But I always thought it was interesting when I was researching his buildings that he had done this building on Emerson, and that the italics are a quote from the newspaper, that they were building this additional building because of the overcrowding at the Wesley Avenue School. And that the idea was that eventually they would rebuild the school and enlarge it, and so then this could be converted to stores, which it was. And Dave Roberts, who the longtime Evanston had his architectural firm there, he just closed it this year, I think. Gave us some great stuff for our collection. But I was noticed he let me come in and take a look at it when I was doing my thesis, and you could see where the chalkboard lines, borders still were in the building, which I thought was cool. And I also thought it was interesting that Carl Anderson was listed as the janitor of the school. Good on him that he had enough financing to build a building, because apparently it was done in his name. And then it was rebuilt again in 1905 by Childs and Smith, with an addition in 1924, also by Childs and Smith. Frank Childs, also a native Evanstonian, grew up on what is now Ridge Terrace, just off a ridge, kind of kitty corner to the hospital. That was their farm, the Childs farm. They were there from the mid-1800s, early Evanston days. So, and I think try to get a shot of it now. Kind of hard to find some glamour shots, but this edition was done again in 1964 by OWP&P, and then there was a lot of discussion about how Dewey was overcrowded, and even then how they were going to have to transfer kids and bus kids to College Hill or Walker or Timber Ridge, which we'll cover, because a few of us might not remember College Hill. And then the Noyes Street School, I'm sorry I couldn't find a better shot, it's a little blurry, which is now, of course, Noyes Cultural Arts Center, designed by Burnham in 1894. And there's sort of a map of it, you can kind of get a shot of it. And then there were additions, so behind it is the sort of perpendicular, and you can kind of tell from the Sanborn map in the lower right-hand corner, the front on Noyes, and then the perpendicular addition to the back, and then the gym and the auditorium by Perkins and Will in 1950. And of course, as I mentioned, Larry Perkins was Dwight's son and was sort of raised on educational buildings. Shot of it. And then Larimer School, if anybody's ever heard of Larimer, it's now a park. It was a twin of Noyes School. It was built about the same time, and it was there until 1936. You can kind of see where it was situated on Crane, and I think that's Oak, but we'll get another shot of it. And about 1935, there was quite a bit of consternation, because this is when they decided that they were going to close the school. And I'll cover it more in detail later, but as I mentioned, there were 2 school districts. And apparently a number of, District 75 and District 76. I'm going to remember which is which was south and which was north. But enrollment was dropping off. It was the Depression. I don't know if people were leaving or not having as many children, earlier, they had sort of rejiggered the line between the two, so that a lot of the kids that went to Larimer were actually really in the other districts, because the divider between the 2 districts was there, were in the South District area, but they were allowed to go to the North District, and they decided to change that. Say, you know what, we're going to stick with the original boundary. So Larimer lost a lot of students who went to the South Evanston schools, and everybody was very unhappy about that. And there was quite a bit of pushback, but they were not successful in keeping Larimer. So it became a park, and that's a shot of it from Google Earth. They closed the street off there and sort of made it all one big park. Apparently their playground had been on the west side of Oak there, because that original shot, they only had that small area for the building. And then the Central Street School, not to be confused with Central School, which was on Main Street. This was originally known as the Central Street School. It wasn't designed by an architect. It was designed by William Pocklington, who was actually a local builder, but he probably could have been an architect. He did a lot of buildings in Evanston without architects. And he designed the original 4 or 8 room building. And then Dwight Perkins designed the addition when it started to get overcrowded, which is that little building to the right, which I think seems like a lot of effort for a 1 room addition. But at least it's got some architectural character to it. And then when they closed that and tore it down, it was renamed in 1920 for Frank Randon, who was a school board member, and then closed in 1926 when they opened the New Haven School, which we'll get to that in a minute, and demolished in 1931, and now it's Independence Park there on Central, across from the business district.
Yeah.
So going chronologically, I'm about to address the next school, but I thought it was interesting that when they started talking about we're going to need another school in South Evanston, and we've got Patton, Fisher, and Miller are drawing up some plans, and it's going to be on the northeast corner of Asbury and Main Street. Well, there's no school there now. They actually decided to swap it with another parcel on Ashland Avenue, so a block or two west, which was much larger, and they were getting it for the same price. So you can see it on the upper right is the little corner that there looks like 3 lots area that they would have put the originally planned to build a building, and then the lower map is the huge area that was open on Ashland in Maine, which they thought was a better exchange, and I agree. And that became Washington School, about 1900. Patton, Fisher, and Miller were also, they were a Chicago architecture firm, but they were very known for their educational buildings as well. Another shot of it, it was written up in Inland Architect as being a great new school. It's a really interesting layout. You can see on the left-hand side there were 4 classrooms on each floor. And then it got too small, obviously, and so they had a number of additions by Perkins and Will. I saw later was some discussion, I think it was in the Lincoln School, when they were talking in 1966 or whatever about who the architects were going to be, and I read a letter to the editor from someone who said, well, I really, think they should keep the old school, the old building, because it's an architectural building, and I'm sure we're going to give the contract to Perkins and Will, and when we do, can we ask them to, design something with some architectural interest? But so Perkins and Will did that. I thought it was an interesting shot on the cover of the Evanston Review, and some recent pictures of the additions that they put on that, which are now reflecting changes in school architecture, which we'll talk about a little bit with Perkins, but all on one floor, because fire safety became really important, and not so much, in addition to fire prevention, just not having to run down 3 flights of stairs with a bunch of kids if there was a fire. Everything should be on the first floor, easy outs. And also just more time outdoors, right? Of course, Perkins and Will famously did Crow Island School, which I know these 2 folks know all about. And a lot of that was all about, access to the outdoors, being able to readily get some fresh air. And of course, they got that commission because Perkins' dad, Dwight, was good friends with the Saranins, and so they were kind of a package deal. And Saranin really did a lot of the design, and Larry Perkins did a lot of the technical aspects of designing an educational building. And then Washington kept getting bigger, and then of course that a lot of us baby boomers probably remember portable classrooms when you would have to put up temporary classrooms. This one is from Washington. I couldn't find any pictures, but when we get to Willard also had a lot of portable classrooms for a while, I believe. And then Foster School, which was built in 1903, and the architect was Ernest Woodiat, who was Daniel Byrne's nephew and who lived over here on Dempster Street. And it was hard to get a good shot of it. You can see it on the left there. They vacated the street at one point so that you could, when they built the Fleetwood Jourdain Center, so you could go back and forth. They rather immediately planned an addition, so you can see on the sandboard map, the original's in pink, which means brick, and brown means fireproof concrete. So the second edition, I think, or the first edition, was put on. There were a couple of them, I think, 1925 and 1931, yeah. And this article, which of course is impossible to read, but all about this new building and how it's going to be bigger than the Miller School, and it was going to be a great new building. And then, of course, tragically also had a fire in 1958, so those are some shots of the fire on the left, and then the demolition after the fire on the right. And it was only in the original part of the building, the brick building, the fireproof, survived and stayed and was added onto. So those are some shots you can see on the left-hand side, the 2531 edition on the right, and then the 1960 edition, and that's Gangster and Henninghausen again. Another angle on the addition. And then a current day shot of it, and just some interesting articles that I found about trying to sell the building. The one from 1983 was like, District 65 is overwhelmed. They've got 4 offers. They just don't know what to do, who they're going to sell with. And then I see 3 years later, it still hasn't sold. None of them went through. One of them, I think, was a Catholic school, Sisters of Mercy. There were a couple, I don't remember, Temple of Christ and God wanted to buy it. A number of people who professed an interest, but it didn't come through. And then, of course, that is a rendering from the current building catalog of how they would jazz up family focus. Of course, is housed in there for years and years. And I just thought it was interesting. I found this shot of where the current building is being built now. It used to be the big playing field. And I thought this map was interesting. It was also in all of the PR about the new building, about the different ownerships of that big plot of land. And so they're putting the building on the District 65 property. There's some discussion about enough parking for both, and the city of Evanston and District 65, and still having enough green space. And I'm not quite sure if they've ironed that all out, but the building's up. Here's some photographs of it, drawings of it, excuse me. Again, Cordigan Clark, don't know anything about them or where they're from. I drive by there pretty often. It's coming along. And then Orrington School, that's where my kids went. 1911, Rader, Coffin, and Crocker. Orrington, I don't think I put I do have a map, but it doesn't really show. It's on Orrington, which is hence the name, north of Central Street. It was done in 1911. I always thought it kind of looked like an insane asylum. I don't know if that's proper talking anymore, but it never really spoke to me. But it does have some interesting characteristics. We put it in our Evanston 150 book because we thought it was an interesting iteration. And Henry Rader lived in Evanston, up on the Asbury. And then the addition for the auditorium and gym, like you do, in 1931, which was done by Childs and Smith. So there's Frank Childs again. And again, you see this a lot. Like they said, the early schools, they were just classrooms. Maybe a bathroom in the basement if you're lucky. Maybe a small playground if you're lucky. So the gyms and the auditoriums are all coming, and these early buildings are all coming on later as additions. Now we get into Dwight Perkins and his mastery of this field, in my opinion. The first Lincolnwood School that he did, which was, we'll see the maps sort of on the same site, 1913. These photographs, particularly the one on the left, are from a monograph that Perkins Fellows in Hamilton did about architecture for educational buildings. It has some similarities to the other building he did, which we'll see in a minute, which is Oakton School, of course. It was, the Evanston Review cover talks about celebrating the 4th of July there, so it was all part of the North End. A lot of the Crandon kids, when they closed Crandon, went to Lincolnwood. The Perkins lived in the district. They lived on Lincoln, 2300 block of Lincoln, so they were very involved in the school. One of the progressive era ideals about schools, and I talked about this to the Frank Lloyd Wright Conservancy because I'm always trying to get Evanstonians into those folks from Oak Park. I said, Dwight Perkins really came up with a lot of these ideas for open space and gathering spaces, and purported that they should be also, we should think of schools as community spaces, which is another idea that's coming up now in this current discussion. And they absolutely should, and to the point we were making earlier about how they're extra governmental, it belongs to the school district. So I have no idea what's involved with the liabilities and the issues of, you can have a community center, but we're here to see that it's functioning as a school. I don't know how complicated that gets, but Lincolnwood was a community center for many years. I think we have some more shots. That's the monograph that the Perkins Fellows in Hamilton did. That's a picture of the assembly hall on the left, which doubled as a kindergarten space. You can see it on the floor plan on the left-hand side where it says assembly hall. And then the gymnasium was a separate building sort of next to it. And you'll see a couple things from the era. First of all, of course, I have to credit Myron Hunt with this again, because he went out, he lived in Evanston for many years, and then he went out to California and got involved building schools out there, and he built Troop Academy, which was later affiliated with the Cal Polytechnic. And he pioneered the design of the schools as they are in California now, where they all open onto a central open space, and there's no porters, you just go outside. And I like to think that, because he and Perkins were good friends, they were the original four in Steinway Hall, like I always say, it was Perkins and Hunt and Robert Spencer and that guy from Oak Park that everybody gets so excited about. And so I think they stayed in touch, and I think that they talked about this, and Perkins probably thought, because Myron's building predated it, I'm going to try to incorporate that idea here, where the rooms are all opening onto this central area. But it's the Midwest and it's winter, and so we're going to cover it. And so it had that flat roof with as you can see, with the skylights, and I think that didn't hold up too well with the snow and everything, and that was part of the cause for its demise. There's more we'll talk about in a minute. And then there was his wife, Lucy Fitch Perkins, who was an authoress and an artist and very involved in the school. And she wrote a series of books, the twins books, and we have them all in the library here. And they were all about twins from different countries or different cultures. And at the time, very, forward-thinking and progressive in terms of getting kids to understand and appreciate cultures outside of their own. And she did a lot of murals. And these murals, I was fortunate enough the owner who sold it a few years back, used to be a board member here, and she let me come in and take pictures of these murals that were in the living room. Her family photos are still in the shot there at the bottom. But these were murals that Lucy Fitch Perkins had done for a school, and I always kind of thought they were Lincolnwood, but as I found an article about it, and they were actually done for a Chicago high school. It's The Sword in the Stone and Ivanhoe. Ivanhoe was a really popular book and era for, particularly in the 1920s, and we'll see that again in a minute. And thanks to all the folks that have been coming into the History Center recently to research their schools, because they have a lot of knowledge and information that we don't have, and they sent Grace, our Director of Archives, an email the other day, and I'm sorry I didn't get her name, and she's here today tonight. I apologize, because I kept saying, come to my talk. Some pictures of what I believe was the mural that was in the New Lincolnwood School, might have come from the old. So one of the reasons, and I think you'll see it later on one of my maps, that they tore down Lincolnwood School, which I think is a tragedy, the original building, I always heard, was because of the soil quality condition. It's right next to Perkins Woods there. It's just, and we all know how swampy Perkins Woods gets. And I think it sits on clay, and it was very swampy, and I'm sure Dwight had nothing to do with this. I'm sure this was his construction people. But apparently over time, over the 30, 40 years that building was there, it settled badly and had structural issues. And that's why they had to tear it down. One of our docents here, her father's does something very sophisticated with geology. She sent me all kinds of really intricate reports. I'm sorry, guys, I couldn't translate those to show you about the soil conditions. But we decided that that was probably indeed the case, though, that there are a lot of issues with the moisture in the soil there, and that's probably why they had to tear it down. So the new building was built in 1950. Here's some shots of it. Armstrong First and Tilton. Sorry, never heard of them. So this is the mural that was in the second school. That's a picture of Dwight and Lucy's daughter Eleanor reading a twins book to some of the kids in 1954 in the music room under the mural. And then the gal who was just researching sent us this shot of the mural from now, which was apparently, I found this little thing, a gift for Alice Cushing Donaldson Riley, who you should all know founded the Evanston Art Center, and that she gave it to the school. So I'm not sure if it went directly into the 1950, or because I had always heard there were murals in the original Lincolnwood, but I can't find any evidence of it. Here's the map. So the upper left is the original two buildings. The Spencer Avenue went through there, and then there was a park, and then the Forest Preserve on the left. And then on the right is a shot from our Sanborn map. So you can get Sanborn maps online, Library of Congress. I recommend it, it's really fun. But we also have the actual books in our research room. And the cool thing about the actual books is they would update them and they would just paste over and then put the new on. So you can see the original building sort of bleeding through the paste on the far right side. So they kept the original building, built this one next to it, and then tore down the original building and vacated that street, Spencer Avenue, so they could have the whole area. Yeah. And there's Oakton School, 1914. This Oakton was, we did Oakton Historic District a few years back on our Mother's Day house walk, so I know a lot about Oakton District now. And it was, sort of sparsely settled. It was the last to be settled. It was the far south end of Evanston and the southwest corners of Evanston weren't annexed until later. The land was open, and when they started developing, there was a lot in the 20s, the teens in the 20s, and there was a lot of rapid development, and they all of a sudden desperately needed this school in that area, so that was Oakton. And again, it's interesting when Perkins wrote about the school at the time, the Evanston papers wrote about it all the time. They talked a lot about it being a community center. And that it was a great place for a lot of the local residents to come. It was, so we're talking about the days of Jane Addams and Hull House and the Americanization of immigrants, if you will, or at least getting them acclimated to their new country. A lot of them had maybe substandard living conditions. They talked about the bathrooms and the showers at Oakton being made available to the neighbors to come over and use if necessary, and also have evening classes and learn English and things like that. So there's a lot of discussion about Oakton being a community school, a community center as well as a school. Great picture of the Assembly Hall, same idea. He's got it in the middle, although he doesn't wrap the classrooms around. He just put them on either side. The photograph, I want you to remember because we're going to see another photograph of that room in a minute. Again, a single story, all open skylights. Those held up better. There's a map of how the original building was and then the additions and how they played out. Also kindergarten. I think kindergartens were another popular addition. I think the way they taught kindergarten was a lot different. They often wanted big open spaces, right? We don't want a classroom. We don't want a bunch of desks facing the blackboard. We want room for creative play. We want a room for switching up activities and things like that. And there, I know Mark Cleveland was really involved in this because I heard a lot from him at the time. The restoration. These murals were done. Everybody thinks WPA. It probably was WPA, but there's some thought that it was earlier than WPA. The themes are Ivanhoe, so a lot of people tend to think they might have been earlier. It might have been the 20s or the teens because, like we know from Lucy's murals, Ivanhoe was a big subject matter at that time. I found this article and I thought, Eureka, I found it, but it's actually about panels, about like bas-relief panels and not the murals from 1939, but so it does say that was a WPA installation. And then I found that picture of how badly that they had deteriorated and then they were restored recently to their original glory. And it sure makes a difference from the liveliness, also it's in color, but from the earlier photograph. And then Willard School. I have to say that this is the shy stepsister of the crowd. I was really hard for me to find a lot of pictures of Willard. I found some historic pictures anyway. It was done about 10, 11 years after Orrington by the same architects, Rader, Coffin, and Crocker. As you can see from the Sanborn map, there were some additions in 1932 and 1937. I'm guessing that on the right, I don't know, Alan, you were a graduate of Willard?
Yeah, there was a ramp in the hallways.
Is that like the gymnasium and auditorium there in the far right?
No, it's in the gymnasium is over on the left in the basement.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I couldn't find a date on that. But I found a lot of articles about the sudden urgency of building another school in the North End, that everything was overcrowded and they were going to need a new one. They were originally calling it Park School because it's on Park, right? Central Park or whatever. Where they were going to get kids from, and then deciding what they were going to name it. And they decided on Frances E. Willard, and I know Lori Osborne, who was on our staff for many years. Her kids went to Willard. She started a history of Willard School, and the rest is history because then she got involved in the History Center here, in the Frances Willard House, in the Women's History Project. I mean, it all started here. And there was a time when people maybe didn't want to talk about Frances so much, and so they didn't play up the fact that it was named after her. There was the whole, well, she was for Prohibition, and then there was some other unpleasantness later on with Ida B. Wells and some of her work in the WCTU. But it was as I saw they mentioned there, the first Evanston school named for a woman, so I'll give it credit for that. I never thought about that at Willard. And I know they had a number of, like I said, portable classrooms added later. So now we're going to branch out a little bit. If we're still going chronologically, College Hill. I remember College Hill from when we were young. It's not there anymore. It was demolished. And I like how it kind of speaks to, and as far as I can see, it's the cause, and somebody can prove me wrong, how part of Evanston, how part of Skokie got involved with Evanston School District. And this Swenson brothers were doing this, and I found this pamphlet, housing development in the 1920s there. So this is before the Depression, and all building fell off. So during the booming 20s, this guy's building this huge development there. And he wants it, I think he wanted it to be part of Evanston, or because he's calling it Evanston Manor, and maybe was pushing for it to be part of the Evanston schools, although that comes a little bit later. I did find a history of Skokie with that picture in the lower right-hand corner of the two kids. That's the only shot of the original building that I have. But so it was built there on, I think it's Davis. I might have a map of it. Davis and Prairie, I believe. And then it was apparently annexed in 1936 to Evanston. Apparently a lot of the Skokie parents were against it, but in 1936 it became part of the Evanston School District. And I have I was able to dig up a few later pictures of the building from 1948, and it was closed in 1976. Big year for school closures. We'll get to that in a minute. And so Boltwood Intermediate School. So this picture is of what was originally the second building for Evanston Township High School. It was on Elmwood, just south of Dempster. And it, after they built the new high school in 1924, it became Boltwood Intermediate for a couple of years until it burned in 1927. So that's going to inform the usage of Haven School later on, but here's a picture of it. I'll also remember that when we talk about ATHS later. And Haven School, which was built in 1927, Childs and Smith. It was originally intended as an elementary school, but rather immediately it was turned into an intermediate school, maybe partly because Willard was built, maybe partly because Lincolnwood was about 10 years old then. But and again, depending on what your interpretation of, I know intermediate, middle, junior high, sometimes it has 6th, 7th, and 8th, sometimes it has 7th and 8th, sometimes it has 5, 6, and 7. But so anyway, originally built as an elementary school. Everybody was very happy that they named it after Haven, because this is when the original Haven School that we saw at the beginning was demolished. That was in downtown Evanston. So they transferred the name to Haven, to the new Haven. And then immediately started adding on to it a couple of years after it was built. I loved finding this 1920s picture of it. For a while there in the late 20s, we were giving art awards for buildings in Evanston. The first building that won in 1928 was Harley Clark House. So this got an award in 1929 as a beautiful building. And then about 30 years later, they're starting to talk about putting on the gymnasium. And then the Allied Arts Wing in 1949, another shot of it. And you can see the Sanborn map. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, the brown is fireproof construction, Haven School, and then the Allied Arts is in blue. So I guess it's not fireproof, it's stone, but not fireproof. And then I always wondered, because it has that huge piece of land, right, that goes all the way down to Grant, and Kingsley was later built on. And apparently there were plenty of buildings on there at one time. So I actually, because I'm that way, I had to go down and look to see when every one of those buildings was moved, out of those houses. And they were moved at different times over the years, from the 20s through the 60s, the early 60s. So they eventually took over, and I don't know, I guess that's our school dollars at work, to vacate those properties. Moving on, although we'll come back to Kingsley. Nichols Junior High, my alma mater. This is a rendering of it from 1928, also Childs and Smith. And we'll talk about the design. This was a particularly artfully designed building, and very intentionally so. It was built as a junior high or middle school, or whatever we're calling it. It's on the corner of Elmwood and Greenleaf. And again, you could see where the shadows bleeding through the paste over where those houses were purchased. They were, I found an article that said several of them were condemned or eminent domain, because the people refused to sell, I guess, or never got back to the city, so they just condemned them and removed them. And this is the design. It was designed for I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, Doge's Palace at St. Mark's Campanile in Venice. So that picture on the right is what they're modeled after. So a reminder. And I had a call a few years back from somebody who said, are those bricked in arches, were they always bricked in, or were they originally windows? And I said, I'm going to guess that they were. And I found one little picture, but then I found this one so yes, clearly they were very much of the original design. I think the auditorium's up there, so maybe they felt that there was too much light coming in. Some of the pictures of the interior, not that great, again, a lot of newspapers, but there are these murals in the library of Venice. And one of the reasons why the school was so artful was because Dr. Nichols, who was very popular, he was superintendent of the South Evanston School District for like 40 or 50 years. I mean, just a really long time. And he was very beloved. I saw a thing in the file that with a picture of him, and it said most beloved man in Evanston. I don't know how accurate that is, but he was very loved. And he, in his retirement, loved to make things out of tiles, these beautiful tiles that he got. A lot of them he got from the Columbian Exposition, a lot of them were Persian tiles. We have a bench up on the second floor that was made by him. So those are some pictures that I found of him at work in the basement. He always kept a workshop in the basement at Nichols, and it was always there for him to come down and work in. So in 1950, the two school districts were finally consolidated. So, 76 was the South Evanston one, and 75 was the North Evanston one. So it was terribly clever of them to make District 65 by taking the second digit in the 2 and making it District 65. And initially, Dr. Shute was the South Evanston, whichever. Dr. Shute was one of them, and David Walker was the other superintendent. So they were co-superintendents for the first year until, Shute retired, and then Walker took over for a number of years. So we finally found that date. And by the way, in case we didn't already believe that AI isn't worth anything, I asked AI, because I was starting to get lazy, what year they merged, and it said 1967, and I knew that wasn't true. So I had to do some digging, so never trust AI. So here's an interesting couple of things from 1950 to kind of set the stage. That's attendance areas. The League of Women Voters, every 10 years or so, issues a book called This is Evanston. It's a really great book. Those of us who've lived here forever didn't even know it existed till they started working here. But it has all kinds of information about how the city works and who to go through for what, and things about the school district. So they periodically publish these attendance area pictures, maps. And what's interesting about this one, which is different than all the other ones, is that they've included the parochial schools on this, which I'm not quite sure why. So it's not really germane to what we're talking about today, but you kind of see where some of them were. St. George down the bottom, that was a boys' high school, right? St. Nick's, we got some alma mater here. Ascension, actually Bethlehem in the middle near Dewey. I guess I ended up leaving it out because it was just getting too long, but when I first started pulling photos, I found this thing. It was Bethlehem Lutheran School, and I'm like, I never heard of that. Where the heck was that? I had to look it up. It was actually where Penny Park is now. So when they demolished that, they turned it into Penny Park. And you can see that College Hill is kind of an afterthought. It's kind of stuck on there, like, oh yeah, by the way, these guys, they're over here too. And then that cover of the review was a fun, it says like at American Education Week, but it was a great way to find some photographs of some of the older buildings that I wasn't able to dig up anywhere else, like College Hill and let's see, Willard's there. So then we're going to go into the later part of the 20th century. Dawes School, 1954, Perkins and Will, an early glamour shot of it, and then a picture from Google Earth, Dodge and Oakton. And then just a few articles I found about it. And Kim, I was thinking afterwards I should have talked to you and I could have gotten some pictures of the inside, because I know there's some great stuff about Dawes on the inside. His portraits there, and the construction of the school, which is kind of an interesting roof line. And then what I always thought of as Timber Ridge, but is now Bessie Rhodes, was built in 1957. So now the primary motivators, like we said, population growth and settlement patterns. So after, we got two things going here in the Skokie, Evanston area. We've got the baby boomers hitting school age. And the Skokie is what I could determine from a quick perusal of that little history of Skokie was, it sort of languished. It was originally Niles Center, right? And the downtown is over there on Oakton, west of Skokie Boulevard or whatever, and sort of grew up there. So this area was really pretty open. That guy with College Hill was, developing huge tracts of open land. And as we all know, throughout the Depression, throughout the Second World War, there's not a lot of buildings, really no building. And after that, it just gets really super developed. The Timber Ridge housing development goes in, and I found, you can't really see it, but I just did a nod to like the ads that they were running in the newspapers to buy these super modern electric homes in Timber Ridge, and we've got like 5 models, and you can choose your one that you want to build. And so they built Timber Ridge as an elementary school for this area, and then it became a junior high later. And then, of course, it was named for Dr. Bessie Rhodes in 2004, and she has just so much history. I mean, I was like, I can't go too far down this rabbit hole because I'll get distracted. But she was an award-winning teacher. She was principal at Miller for many years. She was interim principal at Haven. I think it might have been before Lorraine came in. So she really had, what a great idea to honor her with this school, and the second school that was named for a woman in Evanston. And then when I was thinking of Skiles, another Perkins and Will, I was renamed the Martin Luther King Jr. Magnet School in 1979, and then after they closed Foster, and now I think it's Literary and Fine Arts Lab. We were talking about that, so very cool. Interesting mosaics. And then Walker School, as we now know, he was superintendent, remember, with Shute at the beginning, and superintendent for many years. So these were some early iterations of Walker. Our good friends, we know it's one or the other, right? Perkins and Will or Gangster and Henninghausen. And then Chute. I know a lot of kids who went to Chute are very proud of Chute. It was one of the first. It was built as a junior high school, and it was supposedly cutting edge with all the teaching technologies at that time. It's on Oakton. Dr. Chute was very proud of his school. It was named for him. He said how honored he was that it was named for him. He had a lot to do with the building of it, the design of it, a lot of input as a educational professional and former superintendent. I think I've got a map. Yeah, I thought this was interesting. This is the big yellow things are greenhouses. A lot of Southwest Evanston was greenhouses. A whole other topic I'd love to talk about someday is like all the Luxembourgians and all the greenhouses. And so until they built that building, like sometime between 1950 and 1968, it was still greenhouses there. I think there's one left, Clausen, right, or something over on Burnham. So that's the location of Chute, that big rectangle in the upper right-hand corner. And the last of the brand new schools, unless you want to call Foster, it was a new building, was Kingsley in 1967. There's our friends Ganster and Henninghausen again. There's some pictures from the brochure. One of the things I came across, and I can't remember if I included in here or not, which I never really realized it, but they were talking about a lot when they designed it, was that it was designed particularly to accommodate handicapped kids. So there were elevators in the building, and there were pictures of I never realized that. And so when they first started talking about closing this in the 70s, or maybe it was later, it's coming up, they talked a lot about, well, now you're disenfranchising all these kids, and you're going to send them to schools that are multiple stories and they don't have elevators in them. A lot of them have been retrofitted now, I believe. And so there's another look at the area where Kingsley went in, like we talked about, and I noticed there was like a gas station on the corner, which fascinated me. I hope they ameliorated that land. So I found this picture. I'm like, oh, look, there's the gas station. So the gas station on the left, and then the demolition on the right when they started just opening up that whole parcel. And then, as you see in the bottom, under construction, Kingsley under construction, they're calling it Haven Elementary School because they never had a Haven Elementary School because it got turned into a junior high pretty quick. So they decided they were going to name it Haven. But they ended up naming it Kingsley. And again, Homer Kingsley was a superintendent of Evanston schools for many years, very popular. He was also married to Lucy Fitch's sister. And they lived over on Hinman, so it's all in the family. And so the 70s were a hard time for school closures in Evanston. All us baby boomers are aging out, and the school population is just dropping off dramatically, and they can't afford to keep all these buildings open. And so they closed Central on Main Street, they closed Foster, they closed College Hill, they closed Timber Ridge for a while. They said they closed Noyes, they closed Miller, they closed Kingsley. And a lot of this article talks about some of the arrangements they've made. Timber Ridge was getting rented out as a daycare center. College Hill was rented out to a rabbinical college. I mean, a lot of creative, adaptive reuses of these buildings. And as we know, some of them got put back into service and some didn't. And I thought that article on the far right was interesting. Parents calm but confused. That's when they first started talking about how they were going to do this. I can't imagine. Katie, I don't know if you were aware.
My mother was
the
PTA president at Miller when the year they decided to close.
Oh,
that was wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
Was she calm?
She was not calm.
She was not calm. All right, let's see. I think we're closing in on this a little bit. Just for kicks, I thought I'd just compare some more attendance areas, maps, just so we can see how much they've changed and keep getting readapted. The one from 1970 on the left, And then the one from 1995 on the right, you can see how many fewer schools there are in 1995. This is all these ABCs that are telling you where those areas are getting bused to. The asterisk means they're getting bused. No asterisk means it's close enough they're going to walk. So it's really interesting to see how that all worked out. And then on the far right was that you got the Willard patch in the middle. And like I said, that's a whole nother subject. And Foster about how you're gonna, who you're gonna bus where to what school. And it's coming up again, right? So that's the conclusion of the District 65 schools. I was going to end it there. I'm like, I'm only doing District 65 because it's probably 10 o'clock by now, right? And then I thought, oh, but let's just end with on a high note, maybe, or at least a little bit of one for ETHS, and just kind of bring it on home. This is another photograph and floor plan from the Perkins Fellows and Hamilton's playbook. One of the things I remember coming across randomly over the years was a discussion of where they were going to put this high school. So, because this is Evanston, needless to say, there were years and years of debates about when that Boltwood Intermediate that we saw earlier, right, got too small. The land wasn't big enough. Where are we going to put the next high school? And there was talk of where Leahy Park is now on Lincoln and Ridge. And there was talk of, and now I'm blanking, of another space in another part of Evanston. And then everybody was objecting that it was too far from wherever they lived. And they passed, just think you're getting it, you didn't get it, blah, blah, blah. And so finally it falls apart. And then somehow they come upon the site where it is now, right, on Dodge, which was, I've seen, called Onion Fields. It was still open. It was wide open, like some of those we've seen on the maps earlier. And Wilfred Beersley was the superintendent at the time, and he was in charge of navigating this whole thing for everybody. And he said that in the end, he was really glad that all the other sites didn't work out and they ended up where they did, because he said, I realized I had been thinking too small. If we had decided on any one of those other sites, it wouldn't have been big enough to keep up. And boy, he didn't even know the half of it, right? By 1924, he's going blind and he's moved to Pasadena, California. And so he wasn't around much longer to see how big ETHS was going to get. But thank goodness, I guess it paid off for us in the end that we ended up moving it out there, because plenty of room to grow. You can see the original floor plan. I keep telling everybody, that's an easy school to navigate. Don't tell me you can't find your way around that school. It's an H. You're either in H or you're in one of the wings. But so, he had sketched in where which did indeed happen, because there are 4 courtyards now, right? And for a while they called them 4 schools. And the gym and the auditorium. And then I just stumbled across this article when I was looking up all the other schools. So I thought, let me throw that in, because it shows the 1957 editions, which I'd never really thought about before. The swimming pool and that wonky thing that's happening on the front of the building that I never thought made architectural sense, which is now the offices and the main entrance on Dodge. And then, of course, the 4 additions that were added in 1968, which were brand new when we hit ETHS, and everybody was very proud of them. So that kind of brings us full circle. If you can make it through District 65, you can get to District 202, and it's not perfect, and there's all issues, but at least you don't have to worry about the school's going to close and you're going to have to move to someplace larger, because it's definitely been capable of accommodating all the growth in Evanston over the years. So thanks, and I'm happy to take any questions if I can answer them. Anybody? Oh, yeah, Jill.
I find it interesting that Kingsley was, because I lived through that. I went to one Kingsley, but I'm saying Kingsley was like super exciting to us, their little playground. We were all thinking we had the worst one ever, theirs was the best. And anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is it was the brand new school, and the fact that it got closed so quickly, and why do you, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, like I said, I could have used another 3 years to work on this talk to really dive into every.
Too, right?
Yeah.
We're opening, but maybe, I don't know, maybe Northlight said, hey,
I
we'll
think
go there.
Northlight said, I think it was a commercial thing.
We want this one.
We want this property, it's perfect for us.
Okay.
We'll pay you a big, they paid rent for years.
Yeah, they did. It was,
Yeah.
And so that was like the first deal that got done in all the schools that closed in '76.
Okay,
That
makes
explains
sense.
a lot. Yeah. I did see that they were one, and there were a couple other things in their school, in that building as well,
Yep.
in addition to Northlight.
There was daytime offices that were there too, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I think it was in one of the articles, but I need my magnifying glass. Yeah, in the back. Oh, Kim, it's Kim.
I've heard that ETHS is the biggest high school, like,
Physical plant.
In one building.
Physical plant, I wouldn't be at all
In one building.
in one building. I've heard that too. Now that I'm a professional historian, I do like to find a primary source that can verify that for me, but I absolutely have heard that. And I mean, and when Deborah was here, I was like, she said, what is it with you guys in the high school in this town? I said, I don't know, I can tell you, but there's a lot of pride, and in our day, and we were in the top 10 in the country for years and years in the 70s and the 60s, and because we're just one school and we pull from the whole town, we got the creme de la creme for our sports teams. So I think that also, spoke to a lot of our dominance in the sports arena, because we had everybody. And I always say, and this is totally probably kind of off subject, but I tell people who are new to Evanston or worried about their kids at the high school, I said, the thing about the high school is it's so big. There's no in crowd and out crowd. There is something for everybody there, in my experience. And so, it's great. It just offers you so many opportunities. Krista was saying to me, I'm going to Yamo. You ever go to Yamo? And I'm like, I was never a Yamo kid. I went to all the football games. I didn't go to Yamo. But so, there was something for everybody. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I hope so.
No, and now they're expanding. They're building a whole nother art
Yeah,
wing.
the art swing. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Oh, great. See, I thought I was going to be inundated. Yeah, Emma.
You mentioned Boltwood as being the prior high school.
Yeah.
Would that have been the high school back in between 1900 and 1910?
Yes.
I thought it was torn down though.
There was an earlier building that got torn down, and because I wasn't going to go too deep down the high school rabbit hole,
So
sorry,
you're
that's
like
another
me.
talk. Come back. Yeah, because I thought about it. I thought, well, should I throw that original photograph? I'll send it to you. I got your email. It was it looked not unlike that early Central. It was a much more vertical building. It was a lot more compact. I think there was a cupola on it. Evanston didn't have a high school until like the 1880s.
Yeah.
They had what is now Medill was the Evanston Academy. It was affiliated, I think with the university, but it was a prep school type thing. But they didn't have a public high school until they built that building on Elmwood in I think early 1880s. Kind of interesting.
Isn't there a portion of the high school that's called Boltwood?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. One of the four. I was in Beardsley.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Michael.
Michael? Yeah, what were you, babe? You were north with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also called them by the direction they were in.
But they got merged in my
And-
time. They were merged in my time. So
You're a youngster. Okay.
East and west. So the back end and the front end. So Michael and
Beardsley
Beardsley
were
became
combined.
together.
Okay,
So
okay.
I think freshman year I was in Michael,
But then you were.
So we had access to both.
And then what did they call you after they were merged?
East and west.
East and west. Okay. Yeah, and the blockers were all painted different. There were 4 different colors, so you knew, even if you were sleepwalking, which a lot of times maybe you were, you knew what hall you were in.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
This could be a book.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking that as I was going through this, like, it'd be really great. It'd be really great if somebody would write a book. But it would be a tome. And we don't have there. I was talking to Suzanne. Are you still here, Suzanne?
Yes, I'm working on that.
Yeah, okay. All right, because she's worked. Suzanne, in one of her many careers, was a teacher, and there's a warehouse somewhere with their archives. I don't know if there's an archivist in charge of them. I don't know. Oh, you have a plan. Awesome. Suzanne is our archivist, so all right, rock and roll. All right. Because so whoever writes that book is going to need more information. If it wasn't for the review, and I wouldn't have been able to find out 9/10 of this stuff. Yeah, Joe.
Just one thing I found interesting, and told everybody this, but it's kind of cool. I found my grandpa's diploma from graduating from EHS from 1917. So
Awesome.
that would have been, and it was.
That would have been the old
So
building.
Beardsley's the signature of the superintendent.
Yeah.
I forgot who else, but the logo is the same. The way the
I'm
way my
trying to picture it.
it's this big. It's really big.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
the logo, the way that the school writes its name is the same
I love it.
as of now.
Yeah.
Then I have the elementary school one that is from 1913, and until you guys put that out, it's hard to know where he actually went to school because it has no name. It's just Evanston Public Schools.
Oh,
And that one
interesting.
is signed by Kingsley and Dawes.
Oh, Tom.
I mean, like, really,
Interesting.
yeah. So I think from where he lived, I believe that the school he must have gone to is the one on Central Street. Where it-
Crandon.
So pre-Lincolnwood.
Awesome. Alan's dad went to Crandon. Yeah.
Because he graduated in 1913.
Yeah.
Right? So
Oh.
that was pre-Haven.
Yeah.
And then-
And it would have, it might have just opened in 13, Lincolnwood, but no, Crandon was still going strong for another 10 years.
And it must have been K through 8.
Yeah, I believe so. At that time, in 17, yeah, it wasn't until Haven. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, Kim.
I just wanted to share with everyone that the Evanston History Center has been working with ETHS. We had a number of high school students who came in and they did research on the schools for District 65. And so hopefully by the end of the year, Krista, maybe, we should be able to put the histories of each elementary schools on the websites.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so
That's
I'm
great.
excited about that.
Yeah, rock and roll. I like to hear that. Thanks. Great. Well, thanks for coming tonight, everyone.
I appreciate it.
They're always very
Oh, yeah, it was. I know she wants to, I don't know how they make it available. Yeah, yeah. They use phone.